The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. No one calls at 3:17 a.m. with good news. When the officer's voice cut through the static, I knew my world was about to collapse. "Mrs. Harrison, there's been an accident involving your son, Michael." The rest blurred together. Single vehicle collision. Died instantly on impact. But what he said next made no sense. "We found a manila envelope with your name on it, and a note saying this wasn't an accident." My legs gave out. Michael had been planning his own death. The next 3 days passed in a fog of funeral arrangements and casseroles from neighbors I barely knew. Sarah handled everything with the efficiency of someone who'd been preparing for this moment, which should have been my first warning sign. "Don't worry about anything, Mom," she kept saying, her hand constantly on my shoulder. "I'll take care of all the details. You just focus on grieving." At 62, I'd buried my husband 5 years earlier from cancer. I thought I knew how grief worked. But losing your child breaks something in your chest that never quite heals right. Michael had been my miracle baby, born when I was 28 after 3 miscarriages, my only child, the center of my universe until he married Sarah and moved across town to start his own family. As I sat at my kitchen table, numb from the shock, I remembered the last conversation Michael and I had shared. 6 months ago, he'd stopped by unexpectedly after work, pacing my living room with nervous energy. "Mom, if something ever happened to me, would you know how to take care of yourself?" The question had seemed so random at the time. Take care of myself, how? Just, after Dad died, you trusted everyone so completely. The insurance people, the funeral directors, even that contractor who overcharged you for the roof repair. You never questioned anything they told you. I'd been slightly offended. "Michael, I may be getting older, but I'm not naive. I know that. But you're also trusting. Sometimes people see that as an opportunity." Now, staring at the envelope that contained his final message, those words took on terrifying new meaning. Michael hadn't been speaking generally about senior citizens being taken advantage of. He'd been trying to warn me about something specific, about someone specific. Sarah Richardson had seemed perfect when Michael brought her home 6 years ago. Sweet, attentive, with a successful career in pharmaceutical sales. She'd grown up in foster care, she told us, bouncing between homes until she aged out of the system at 18. "I never had a real family," she'd said that first Thanksgiving, tears in her eyes as she helped me set the table. "Michael's given me everything I ever dreamed of." Now she was arranging Michael's funeral with the same methodical precision she used for everything else. The service was beautiful. Sarah had chosen all of Michael's favorite songs, displayed photos from every stage of his life, even arranged for his college roommate to fly in from Seattle to speak. Michael always said his mom was the strongest person he knew, David told the packed church. He said she taught him that when life knocks you down, you get back up and you keep fighting. The words stirred something in my chest, a memory of raising Michael alone during those early years when his father was deployed overseas, teaching him to be observant, to question things that didn't seem right, to write down important details so he wouldn't forget them. I'd always been careful about details. It's what had made me a good teacher, able to spot when students were struggling or when something was happening at home that they couldn't talk about. After the burial, people filled my house with food and stories about Michael. Sarah moved through the crowd like a perfect hostess, accepting condolences and making sure everyone had coffee. "She's such a treasure," my neighbor Margaret whispered to me. "You're so lucky to have her taking care of you during this difficult time." Lucky. That's what everyone kept saying. By evening, the last visitors had gone home. Sarah was loading the dishwasher while I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the manila envelope that had been sitting there for 3 days. As I watched her move efficiently through my kitchen, something felt wrong. Not anything I could put my finger on, just a mother's instinct that had served me well throughout Michael's childhood. The same feeling I'd had when he was 15 and started coming home late with stories that didn't quite add up. When I'd trusted my gut instead of his explanations and discovered he'd been hanging around with kids who were experimenting with drugs. That maternal radar that never quite turns off. "You should probably look at whatever Michael left for you," Sarah said gently, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Maybe it will bring you some peace." I picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. It was heavier than I expected, thick with papers. Sarah settled into the chair beside me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive. "We'll read it together," she said, covering my hand with hers. "Whatever it says, we'll get through it together." Something about that phrase made me uncomfortable. Too controlling, too presumptuous, like she was making decisions for me without asking. I broke the seal and pulled out dozens of documents, bank statements, insurance policies, photographs I didn't recognize. On top was a letter in Michael's precise handwriting. "Mom, if you're reading this, Sarah is probably sitting near you right now, playing the grieving widow perfectly. Don't let her see these papers. She's not who you think she is." Ice water replaced the blood in my veins. I glanced at Sarah, whose shoulders were shaking with what I'd assumed was genuine grief. "What does it say?" she asked softly, voice breaking. Something in her tone felt performative, like she was acting the part of a concerned daughter-in-law instead of actually being one. I folded the letter quickly, my hands surprisingly steady. "Just insurance paperwork, sweetheart. Nothing important." But Michael's words echoed in my mind. "She's not who you think she is." "Are you sure that's all?" Sarah leaned closer, trying to see the papers. "It looks like there's quite a bit there." The way she pressed for information reminded me of students who'd cheat on tests, then ask too many questions about their grades. Guilty people always want to know what you know. Just boring legal stuff." I forced my voice to stay steady. "Michael always was thorough about documentation." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "He got that from you. Always so organized, so careful about details." Something cold settled in my stomach as she said those words. Like she'd been studying me, learning my habits and personality. "I think I need to lie down," I said, gathering the papers back into the envelope. "It's been such a long day." "Of course." Sarah stood immediately. "I'll clean up down here and lock up when I leave. You get some rest." She kissed my forehead, the same way she'd done every day since Michael died. "I love you, Mom. We're going to get through this together." Upstairs in my bedroom, I locked the door and spread Michael's documents across my bed. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals from accounts I didn't know existed. Insurance policies on Michael's life, with Sarah as the beneficiary, purchased just 8 months ago. Photographs of Sarah with men I'd never seen before. Different hair, different clothes, but the same smile I'd trusted for 6 years. And medical records showing that Michael had been to the emergency room twice in the past year with symptoms of poisoning. My hands shook as I read his letter completely. "Mom, Sarah isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Sandra Richardson, and she's been married 4 times before. All of her previous husbands died in accidents within 2 years of marriage, and she collected substantial life insurance payouts each time." The room spun around me. "I've been documenting everything for months, the way you always taught me to pay attention to details. Remember how you used to tell me that people's actions matter more than their words? How you showed me to write everything down because memory can be unreliable." Tears blurred my vision as I remembered those conversations. Simple life lessons I'd shared with my son about being observant and careful. I never imagined he'd need that guidance to save both our lives. The times I got sick after eating meals she prepared, the insurance policies she had me sign, the men she meets with when she thinks I'm at work. I tried to gather enough evidence to have her arrested, but she's too careful, too smart. A sound downstairs made me freeze. Sarah was supposed to have left an hour ago, I crept to my bedroom window and looked down at the driveway. Her car was still there. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I couldn't live with what I discovered, but more importantly, I realized she was planning to move on to her next target. You. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. She's been asking questions about your finances, your health, your daily routines. Last week, she offered to help you organize your medications. Don't let her near your prescription bottles. Don't eat anything she prepares. Don't trust anything she tells you. The evidence in this envelope should be enough to stop her, but you'll need help. I've included contact information for Detective Rodriguez with the state police. He's been investigating similar cases across 3 counties. Tell him Michael Harrison sent you. Footsteps on the stairs. I quickly stuffed the papers back into the envelope and shoved it under my mattress just as Sarah's voice called out. Mom? Are you okay up there? I heard you moving around. I'm fine, sweetheart, I called back, my voice somehow steady. Just getting ready for bed. Okay, I'm going to head home now. Call me if you need anything tonight. I listened to her footsteps retreating down the stairs, then the sound of the front door closing. But when I looked out the window again, her car was still in my driveway. Sarah hadn't left. She was still in my house. And now I knew why. In that moment, every maternal instinct I possessed screamed danger. My son had died protecting me, using the careful observation skills I'd taught him as a child. Now it was time to honor his sacrifice by trusting my own instincts and fighting back against the woman who'd murdered him. I stood frozen at my bedroom window, watching Sarah's car in my driveway. She'd told me she was leaving. I'd heard the front door close, but she was still here. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tried to think. Where could she be? What was she doing? A soft creak from downstairs answered my question. Someone was moving around in my kitchen. I crept to my bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. The sound of cabinet doors opening and closing drifted up through the floorboards. Then the distinctive hiss of my coffee maker starting. Sarah was making coffee at 10:30 at night. Michael's words echoed in my mind. Don't eat anything she prepares. I tiptoed back to the window. Her car sat under the streetlight like a predator waiting patiently for its next meal. Standing there in the darkness, I remembered something that had bothered me years ago. A neighbor of ours, Mrs. Chen, who died suddenly after her daughter-in-law had been so helpful with her daily care. Everyone had praised the young woman's devotion, how she'd brought meals, organized medications, made sure the elderly woman never missed a dose of her heart medicine. But something about the funeral had felt wrong to me. The way the daughter-in-law had answered condolences with practiced phrases. How quickly she'd started discussing the estate with other family members. At the time, I'd dismissed my discomfort as unfair judgment. Now, I wondered if my instincts had been trying to tell me something important. 20 minutes later, I heard Sarah's voice from the bottom of the stairs. Mom, I brought you some warm milk to help you sleep. It's on your nightstand. My blood turned to ice. There was a cup on my nightstand that hadn't been there before. Just like Mrs. Chen's daughter-in-law, always making sure her mother-in-law took her medicine, drank her special teas, ate everything on her plate. Thank you, sweetheart, I called back, forcing normalcy into my voice. You're so thoughtful. Sleep well. I'll check on you in the morning. This time, I watched from my window as she actually got into her car and drove away. But the cup of warm milk sat there like a loaded weapon. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I read every document in Michael's envelope 3 times, each page revealing another layer of Sarah's deception. Sandra Richardson had been born in Phoenix, not foster care. She'd attended Arizona State University on a full academic scholarship. She'd worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative, just like she'd told us. But she'd been fired from 3 different companies for falsifying client records. And the photographs. Sarah with different men, always smiling that same trusting smile I thought had been reserved for our family. Wedding rings clearly visible on her finger in every picture. By dawn, I'd memorized Detective Rodriguez's phone number from Michael's notes. But first, I needed to be smart about this. If Sarah was as dangerous as Michael believed, I couldn't let her know I suspected anything. I had to keep playing the grieving mother-in-law who needed her help with everything. I remembered reading an article once about how predators succeed by making their victims feel grateful for their help. They create situations where saying no feels rude or ungrateful, even when instincts scream warnings. The performance began when she arrived at 8 a.m. with fresh bagels and coffee. "How did you sleep?" she asked, studying my face carefully. "Like a baby," I lied. That warm milk was exactly what I needed. Relief flickered across her features so quickly I almost missed it. The same expression I'd seen on Michael's face as a teenager when I'd believed one of his creative excuses for missing curfew. "I'm so glad. You need your rest." She set breakfast on my kitchen table. "I thought we could start going through Michael's things today. I know it's difficult, but the sooner we organize everything, the easier it will be." His things. Of course she wanted to search his belongings for anything he might have hidden. "That's very thoughtful," I said, sitting down to the bagel she'd prepared for me. "But I'm not quite ready for that yet." "Of course not, whenever you're ready." Her smile never wavered, but I caught the brief tightening around her eyes. The same frustrated expression I'd learned to recognize in my classroom when students realized their manipulation tactics weren't working on me. Over the next few days, Sarah visited constantly, always helpful, always caring, always trying to get me to eat something she'd prepared or take medication she'd organized. "Your blood pressure pills were scattered all over the bathroom counter," she mentioned on Thursday. "I put them in this nice weekly organizer so you won't miss any doses." I thanked her and waited until she left to pour every single pill down the toilet. 30 years of teaching had taught me to trust my instincts about people. When a student's behavior felt wrong, when their stories didn't add up, when they showed too much interest in things that shouldn't concern them, the same red flags were flying with Sarah. On Friday, she brought soup. Chicken noodle, just like you used to make for Michael when he was sick. I ate it while she watched, then spent the afternoon fighting waves of nausea. That evening, I finally called Detective Rodriguez. "Mrs. Harrison?" His voice was professionally neutral. "I've been expecting your call. Michael spoke with me several times over the past few months. He told me to contact you if anything happened to him. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Not at the station. Somewhere public but private. Do you know the diner on Highway 22? Something about his caution made sense. If Sarah was as dangerous as Michael believed, meeting at a police station might draw unwanted attention. Thompson's Diner. Yes. 10 a.m. Come alone and Mrs. Harrison? Don't tell anyone about this call. Saturday morning, I told Sarah I was going to visit my sister in the next town. "That's a wonderful idea," she said. "Family support is so important right now. Drive carefully." As I drove to the diner, I found myself checking mirrors more than usual, though I couldn't say exactly why. Just a feeling that I needed to be careful. Detective Rodriguez was already sitting in a corner booth when I arrived, positioned where he could see the door. He looked tired, like someone carrying heavy knowledge. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "Michael was a good man. Smarter than most people gave him credit for." "You believe what he told you about Sarah?" "I believe the evidence he provided, and I believe the pattern we've identified across multiple jurisdictions." He opened a manila folder similar to the one Michael had left me. Sandra Richardson, also known as Sarah Mitchell, Sarah Parker, and Sandra Williams. 4 previous marriages, all ending in the accidental death of her spouse within 18 to 24 months. The photographs he showed me were newspaper clippings, obituaries, death certificates. James Mitchell, 29, drowned in his swimming pool after suffering what appeared to be a seizure. David Parker, 35, died in a single-car accident after allegedly falling asleep at the wheel. Robert Williams, 42, suffered a fatal heart attack while hiking alone. Each husband had recently purchased substantial life insurance policies. Each had made complaints to friends or family about feeling unusually tired or sick in the months before their deaths. And each had a wife who was very attentive to their medical needs. My hands shook as I stared at the faces of Sarah's previous victims. They all looked like good men, trusting men, like Michael. Why hasn't she been arrested? Because she's extremely careful. The deaths look accidental. The life insurance policies are legitimate. And by the time we identify the pattern, she's moved to a different state with a different identity. But you know it's her. Knowing and proving are different things. That's why Michael's documentation is so valuable. He was gathering evidence from inside the marriage in real time. What kind of evidence? Rodriguez leaned forward. Hair samples from his brush that show traces of digitalis, photos of pills that don't match what's listed on the prescription bottles, recordings of phone conversations with her accomplices. Accomplices? She doesn't work alone. There's a network. People who help her establish new identities, forge documents, provide alibis. We've been tracking them for 2 years. The magnitude of what I was facing crashed over me like a wave. This wasn't just one dangerous woman. This was an organization. She's in my house every day, I whispered. She's organizing my medications, bringing me food, asking about my finances. Which is exactly what we expected. You're her next target, but she'll take time to set everything up perfectly. That gives us an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? To catch her in the act. But it means you'll have to keep pretending you don't suspect anything. Can you do that? I thought about Michael's letter, about his courage in documenting everything, even when he knew it might cost him his life. I thought about all the years I'd spent reading people's faces in my classroom, spotting lies and manipulation, protecting students from bullies and predators. Those skills hadn't disappeared just because I was grieving. What do you need me to do? Rodriguez smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. We need you to help us build a case that will put her away forever. But first, we need to make sure she doesn't succeed in making you her 5th victim. He slid a small device across the table. Recording device. Looks like a hearing aid. Wear it whenever she's around. We need to capture her incriminating herself. What if she realizes what I'm doing? Then you call this number immediately. He handed me a card with a phone number written in pen. Day or night. We'll have units at your location within minutes. As I drove home, the recording device hidden in my purse, I realized something had shifted inside me. For the first time since Michael's death, I wasn't just grieving. I was fighting back. Sarah thought she was dealing with a broken old woman who would be easy to manipulate and eliminate. She had no idea that her latest victim had spent 30 years learning to spot exactly the kind of predator she was. But I had to be smarter than she was. I had to make her believe I was still the helpless widow who needed her constant care and attention. While I gathered the evidence that would finally bring justice for Michael and all the men who'd died before him, the real investigation was about to begin. The recording device sat in my ear like a tiny secret weapon. For 3 days, I played the perfect grieving mother while Sarah continued her careful campaign to poison me. The chicken soup on Monday left me dizzy for hours. The herbal tea on Tuesday made my hands shake. The vitamins she organized on Wednesday had a strange, bitter aftertaste that lingered all day. But each time she offered something, I smiled gratefully and thanked her for being so caring. I don't know what I'd do without you, I told her Thursday morning as she handed me my freshly organized pills. You'll never have to find out, she replied, squeezing my hand. We're family. Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. Each night after Sarah left, I sat in Michael's childhood bedroom, surrounded by his old baseball trophies and school photos, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. My son had spent the last months of his life living with a woman who was systematically poisoning him. He'd known he was going to die, but instead of running, he'd stayed to protect me. The courage that must have taken was overwhelming. I found myself talking to him in the darkness, telling him about my days with Sarah, asking him what he would have done next. Sometimes I imagined I could hear his voice responding, reminding me of lessons he'd learned growing up. "Remember what you taught me about bullies in school, Mom? How they keep pushing until someone finally stands up to them?" Sarah was just a more dangerous version of those playground predators. Thursday afternoon, Detective Rodriguez called. "We've got enough," he said. 3 days of recordings, plus what Michael documented. The district attorney thinks we can move forward. "When?" "Tomorrow morning. We'll arrest her at your house, make it look like a routine wellness check. She won't know you were involved." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to sit down. For a moment, I felt lighter than I had since Michael's death. Justice was finally coming. It was almost over. But as I hung up the phone, something nagged at me. Sarah was too smart, too careful to be caught this easily. 3 months of investigation by Michael, 2 years of tracking by police, and it would all end with a simple arrest at my kitchen table? I pushed the doubt away. I wanted this nightmare to be over. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my exhaustion from sleepless nights. Sarah came by at her usual time with fresh muffins and coffee. "You look tired," she said, studying my face with the intensity of a doctor examining symptoms. "Are you sleeping well?" "Not really. I keep having nightmares about Michael." "That's completely normal. Grief affects everyone differently." She set a plate in front of me. "I brought your favorite. Blueberry muffins from that bakery downtown." I took a bite, the recording device capturing every word of our conversation. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what happens next. With the house, I mean. It feels so empty without Michael." Her eyes sharpened with interest like a cat spotting movement in tall grass. "Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller? Maybe a nice retirement community?" "Actually, I was wondering if you and Emma might want to move in here. There's so much space, and I could help with childcare." The suggestion hung in the air between us. I watched her face carefully, seeing calculation behind her sympathetic expression. "That's incredibly generous," she said slowly. "But I wouldn't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing. You're all the family I have left." Something flickered across her face. Not love or gratitude, but opportunity. Pure, cold opportunity. "Well, maybe we could try it temporarily. See how it works out." "I'd love that. We could make it official. I could add you to the deed, make sure you and Emma are taken care of if something happens to me." Now, I had her complete attention. This was what she'd been working toward for 6 years. "Mom, you don't need to worry about things like that. You're going to be around for years." "I hope so. But at my age, you never know. I want to make sure Emma has security." "That's very thoughtful. Maybe we should talk to a lawyer about setting up some kind of trust." Perfect. She was taking the bait exactly as Detective Rodriguez had predicted. "I'll call my attorney Monday morning," I said. "We can make an appointment for next week." "Wonderful. I'm sure Emma will be so excited to have her grandmother close by all the time." At exactly 10:30, there was a knock at the front door. Sarah frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" "No, maybe it's just a package delivery." I answered the door to find Detective Rodriguez and 2 uniformed officers standing on my porch, their expressions professionally neutral. "Mrs. Harrison? I'm Detective Rodriguez. We're conducting a wellness check. We received a report that you might be in danger." "In danger? I don't understand." Sarah appeared behind me, her hand protectively on my shoulder. "Officers, I'm Sarah Harrison, her daughter-in-law. What kind of danger?" Rodriguez studied her face carefully. "We've received information suggesting that someone may be attempting to harm elderly residents in this area. We're checking on anyone who might be vulnerable." "Well, as you can see, she's fine. I've been taking care of her since my husband passed away recently." I'm sure you have. Mind if we come in and ask a few questions? Sarah's hesitation lasted only a fraction of a second, but I caught it. The same brief pause I'd learned to recognize in students who were debating whether to lie about forgotten homework. Of course not. We settled in my living room, Sarah sitting protectively close to me, but now her closeness felt suffocating instead of comforting. Mrs. Harrison, have you noticed any unusual activity lately? Anyone new in the neighborhood? Any changes in your routine? Not really. Sarah has been helping me with everything since Michael died. And you're comfortable with these arrangements? Absolutely. I don't know what I would have done without her. Rodriguez nodded, making notes in a way that suggested routine bureaucracy rather than criminal investigation. What about your medications? Any changes there? Sarah organized them for me, made everything much easier to manage. I see. Mrs. Richardson, you have medical training? Sarah stiffened slightly. Richardson? My name is Harrison now. And no formal training. Just experience taking care of family members. Of course, Harrison, my mistake. Rodriguez closed his notebook with an air of satisfied completion. Well, everything seems to be in order here. Mrs. Harrison, if you notice anything suspicious or feel unsafe for any reason, please don't hesitate to call us. He handed me a card with the police department number, and something in his eyes told me to pay attention. After they left, Sarah paced my kitchen like a caged animal. That was strange, she muttered. Why would they think you were in danger? I have no idea. Maybe there really is someone targeting elderly people. Maybe. But she didn't look convinced. She looked like someone whose carefully laid plans had been interrupted by an unexpected variable. You know what? I think I'll stay home tonight, she said, gathering her purse with quick, nervous movements. Let you get some rest. Call me if you need anything. Something in her tone felt different, more distant, like she was already pulling away. An hour after she left, my phone rang. Rodriguez's voice was tight with frustration and barely controlled anger. She made us. Somehow she knew. The bottom of my world dropped out. What do you mean? Sandra Richardson/Harrison disappeared. Her apartment is cleaned out. Her car is gone. She's in the wind. My legs gave out, and I sank onto my kitchen chair. What about Emma? The little girl wasn't at the apartment. We're checking with schools, but what? There's no record of any Emma Harrison enrolled in local schools, no pediatric medical records, no birth certificate on file. The room began to spin around me. What are you saying? I'm saying Emma might not exist. Or, if she does, she's not Sarah's daughter. The manufactured granddaughter I'd been worried about protecting was another lie in Sarah's web of deception. Another tool she'd used to manipulate my emotions and gain my trust. She played me, I whispered. The whole time she was playing me. She's done this before, creates elaborate backstories, fake families, whatever she needs to gain trust. But here's what concerns me most. What? She's not running far. Women like Sarah don't abandon territory they've invested this much time in. She'll be back. When? Soon, and she'll be desperate now. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also take bigger risks. I hung up the phone and walked through my empty house, seeing it with new eyes. Every cup Sarah had brought me, every meal she'd prepared, every pill she'd organized, every kind gesture had been calculated to kill me slowly and inherit everything I owned. But now she knew I suspected her, which made me infinitely more dangerous to her alive, and her infinitely more dangerous to me. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. Sarah Richardson thought she'd been hunting an easy target. Tomorrow, she was going to discover she'd been wrong about that. Very wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like Sarah creeping back to finish what she'd started. Detective Rodriguez had stationed a patrol car outside, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Sarah had evaded police in 4 different states. One squad car wasn't going to stop her. At dawn, I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to think the way Michael would have. Methodically, systematically. What did I know that Sarah didn't realize I knew? The recording device was still in my ear, though there was no one left to record. Michael's envelope sat on my kitchen table, and I spread the documents out again, looking for something I might have missed. That's when I found it. A business card tucked behind one of the bank statements. Ellis Security Solutions. Private Investigation Services. Below it, a handwritten note from Michael. Mom, if the police can't help, call Marcus Ellis. He's been tracking Sarah's network for 3 years. Tell him Michael sent you. I stared at the card, realizing my son had anticipated even this scenario. Even the possibility that the official investigation might fail. He'd been 3 steps ahead, just like he'd learned from watching me solve problems throughout his childhood. I dialed the number immediately. Ellis here. The voice was gravelly, professional, tired. This is Helen Harrison. My son Michael left me your card. A pause. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something more personal. I heard about Michael. I'm sorry for your loss. He was a good kid, smarter than most adults I work with. He said you've been tracking Sarah's network. For 36 months. She's cost me 2 clients and nearly got me killed once. When can we meet? Now? Address? 20 minutes later, Marcus Ellis knocked on my back door. A man in his 50s with scarred hands and eyes that missed nothing, like someone who'd seen too much of human nature's dark side. Police patrol out front, he observed, settling into my kitchen chair. Good, but not enough. Detective Rodriguez said Sarah disappeared. She's 40 minutes away in a motel outside Millerville. Red Honda Civic, license plate 749BCH. Checked in yesterday afternoon under the name Sandra Mitchell. My coffee mug hit the table harder than intended. You know where she is? Knowing and catching are different things. She's got 3 exits from that motel and a police scanner in her room. The minute Rodriguez moves units that direction, she'll vanish again. Ellis opened a laptop and showed me surveillance photographs taken with a telephoto lens. Then what do? We use the one advantage we have. She thinks you're helpless. The photos showed Sarah meeting with 2 men I didn't recognize. Parking garage yesterday evening. Even in the grainy surveillance images, something about them made my skin crawl. Who are they? Tommy Breslin and Jake Morrison. They provide new identities and clean up loose ends for Sarah's operation. They're also the muscle when things get complicated. Muscle? The reason Sarah's previous victims died in accidents instead of from poisoning. When the drugs don't work fast enough, or when someone gets too suspicious, they stage car crashes, drownings, heart attacks. Ice filled my veins as understanding crashed over me. Michael's single vehicle collision suddenly made terrible, devastating sense. They killed my son. Most likely, Michael got too close to exposing the network. But here's what Sarah doesn't know. Ellis pulled up another photograph. This one showed Sarah's motel room from across the street, taken with professional surveillance equipment. She's planning to come back tonight, finish the job herself this time. She can't leave you alive knowing what you know. How do you know this? Because I've been listening to their phone calls for 8 months. Sarah's desperate. The police visit spooked her, but she's invested 6 years building her relationship with you. She won't walk away from that inheritance without one final attempt. I set down my coffee cup, my hands steadier than they'd been in days. What inheritance? I'm a retired high school teacher. I don't have substantial assets. Ellis showed me documents I'd never seen before. Your husband's life insurance policy, the one Sarah helped you fill out the paperwork for 5 years ago. I stared at the policy. $200,000, with Sarah listed as secondary beneficiary after me. I never agreed to make her a beneficiary. Forged signature, same technique she used with all the others. She adds herself to policies, wills, bank accounts. By the time anyone notices, she's already collected and disappeared. But Michael would have known about this. He did. It's in his notes. But he needed more evidence before going to authorities. Evidence that would prove systematic fraud across multiple states. Ellis opened another file, and my breath caught in my throat. What he discovered was bigger than just Sarah. She's part of a network that targets recently widowed women across the Midwest. They share information, provide alibis for each other, help establish new identities. The photographs showed at least 8 different women, all with Sarah's same calculated smile, all with the same predatory eyes I'd learned to recognize. But it was worse than that. How many people has she killed? Directly? Probably 12. But the network as a whole. We estimate 37 deaths over the past 8 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 37 families destroyed. 37 people who'd trusted the wrong person at their most vulnerable moment. Why hasn't law enforcement shut them down? Because they operate across state lines, use different methods each time, and they're extremely careful about evidence. Until Michael started documenting everything from the inside, we couldn't prove the connections. Ellis showed me pages of Michael's handwritten notes, and tears blurred my vision as I recognized his careful, methodical approach to problem-solving. He was building a federal case, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, the kind of charges that would put the entire network away for life. But he died before he could finish. He finished. Everything's here. Ellis's voice carried a mixture of admiration and grief. Michael sent me copies of all his evidence 2 days before his death. He knew they were onto him. The courage that must have taken was overwhelming. My son had known he was going to die, but he'd kept working to protect others. Then why hasn't the network been arrested? Because Sarah's handlers know Michael was gathering evidence. They're eliminating witnesses and destroying records before law enforcement can move. Ellis pulled up news articles on his laptop, and the headlines made my stomach turn. Tommy Breslin's ex-wife died in a house fire last week. Jake Morrison's former business partner had a heart attack Tuesday. Both of them had been talking to federal investigators. The scope of what we were facing crashed over me like a tidal wave. They're killing anyone who might testify against them. Which is why you're in more danger than Detective Rodriguez realizes. You're not just Sarah's next victim. You're a federal witness who could bring down an entire criminal organization. I thought about Michael's bedroom upstairs, about his childhood photos and baseball trophies, about the little boy who'd grown up to be brave enough to take on killers to protect his mother. What do I do? We use Michael's evidence to set a trap, but it means putting you at considerable risk. What kind of risk? Ellis closed the laptop and looked at me directly. We let Sarah come here tonight. We record her attempting to kill you, and we use that recording plus Michael's evidence to destroy the entire network. She'll actually try to kill me? She has to. You know too much. But we'll be ready. How? Ellis pulled equipment from his bag. Cameras, recording devices, emergency transmitters, things I couldn't even identify. I'll be positioned outside with a response team. The minute she makes her move, we'll have her. What if something goes wrong? Ellis studied my face for a long moment. Then you better hope you're tougher than Sarah thinks you are. That afternoon, Ellis spent 3 hours wiring my house with surveillance equipment while explaining Sarah's likely approach. She'll most likely come through the back door around midnight, he explained, installing a tiny camera above my kitchen window. She's been watching your routines for weeks. She knows you take medication at bedtime and leave the kitchen door unlocked. How do you know she's been watching? Because Tommy Breslin has been parked across the street every night this week. Different cars, but same pattern. They've been documenting your schedule, looking for the perfect opportunity. The idea that I'd been under surveillance for weeks, that strangers had been studying my life like predators watching prey, made my skin crawl. As evening approached, I tried to eat dinner but couldn't manage more than a few bites. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me like a physical thing. "Nervous is good," Ellis said, testing one of the recording devices. "Keeps you alert. But remember, she still thinks you trust her. If she calls or shows up early, act confused and grateful." "What if she doesn't come?" "She'll come. Her handlers are pressuring her to clean up loose ends before they move the operation to a different region. They can't start fresh with new targets while you're still alive to identify her." At 10 p.m., Ellis left through the back door. "I'll be watching from Morrison's surveillance van across the street. You're not alone in this." But sitting in my dark kitchen, waiting for a serial killer to come murder me, I had never felt more alone in my life. The house creaked and settled around me, every sound amplified by fear and anticipation. I thought about Michael, about how he'd faced this same terror for months while gathering evidence against Sarah. How he'd kissed her goodnight, knowing she was poisoning him. How he'd smiled at family dinners while documenting her conversations with accomplices. The courage that must have required was beyond my comprehension. At 11:47 p.m., I heard the soft click of my back door opening. Sarah's voice drifted through the darkness, sweet and concerned as always. "Mom, are you awake? I brought you some warm milk." Sarah's silhouette appeared in my kitchen doorway, backlit by the streetlight outside. She moved quietly, confidently, like someone who'd done this many times before. In her hands was a steaming mug and what looked like a small medicine bottle. "I saw your light was still on," she whispered. "Thought you might be having trouble sleeping again." I stayed perfectly still in my chair at the kitchen table, letting her think I was drowsing. "You're so good to me," I murmured, keeping my voice sleepy and grateful. Sarah set the mug in front of me. The smell was familiar, warm milk and honey with something else underneath, something bitter and medicinal. "This will help you rest. I added a little extra something to make sure you sleep through the night." Her words were being recorded by 3 different devices Ellis had hidden throughout the kitchen. I lifted the mug to my lips, pretending to drink while barely letting the liquid touch my mouth. Perfect. Just like when I was a child. Sarah watched me intently, her mask of concern slipping slightly. "Drink it all down. You need your rest." I took another fake sip, buying time while my mind raced. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. About you and Emma moving in here." "What about it?" "I called my lawyer today. Had him start preparing the paperwork to add you to the house deed." Sarah's eyes sharpened with interest, but she tried to hide it behind her grieving daughter-in-law facade. "Mom, you don't need to do anything that drastic." "I want to. You're all I have left. I should have done this years ago." I pretended to take another drink, letting the bitter liquid barely touch my lips. The lawyer said it would be easier if I also updated my will. Make sure everything transfers to you smoothly. That's very thoughtful, but let's not talk about such morbid things. It's not morbid, it's practical. At my age, I need to be prepared. Sarah sat down across from me, leaning forward with predatory interest. "How much more of that milk do you need to drink?" The question sent chills down my spine. She was monitoring my dosage like a nurse administering medication. "Just a little more." I lifted the mug again. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you really think Emma will be happy here? I mean, it's such a quiet neighborhood. Not much for a young girl to do." Sarah's expression flickered for just a moment. Confusion crossed her features before the mask returned. "Emma loves spending time with her grandmother. I know, but I worry about her school situation." "Which elementary school is she attending again?" A longer pause this time, the kind of hesitation that comes from trying to remember a lie. "Millbrook Elementary." "Millbrook, right." I nodded sleepily. I should call them next week, arrange a meeting with her teachers, get to know them better. "That's not necessary. Emma's doing fine academically." I'm sure she is. Such a bright little girl. Takes after her father. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, she's very much like Michael. The lie sat between us like poison in the air. I pretended to finish the milk, letting the last drop stay in the bottom of the mug. There, all gone. I set the mug down carefully. You're so thoughtful, bringing this over so late. I couldn't sleep either. I keep thinking about Michael. It's hard. Losing a child changes everything. Sarah reached across the table and patted my hand with false sympathy. You're going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of that. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I smiled gratefully. I'm getting sleepy already. Whatever you put in that milk is working. Good. You need your rest. I stood up slowly, swaying slightly like someone fighting the effects of a sedative. I think I'll go to bed now. Let me help you upstairs. Sarah supported my elbow as we walked toward the staircase. I leaned on her heavily, playing the part of a drugged elderly woman while every instinct screamed at me to run. You know, I said as we climbed the stairs, Michael used to bring me warm milk when I couldn't sleep. Even as an adult, he'd come over and take care of me when I was sick. He was a good son. He was. Always so concerned about my safety. Always warning me to be careful about strangers, about people who might take advantage of older folks. Sarah's grip on my arm tightened subtly. Michael worried too much. Maybe, but he was protective. Taught me things. What kinds of things? We'd reached my bedroom door. I turned to face her, letting some clarity return to my expression. How to recognize when someone is lying to me. Sarah's mask slipped completely. What did you say? I said Michael taught me how to recognize when someone is lying to me. Her hand moved toward the medicine bottle in her pocket. You drank the milk. No, Sarah, I didn't. Understanding dawned in her eyes like a cold sunrise. You know, I know everything about Sandra Richardson, about Tommy Breslin and Jake Morrison, about the other husbands you murdered. Sarah's expression transformed from fake concern to cold calculation, and for the first time, I was seeing the real woman who'd been living in my house for 6 years. How long? Since the night you left the warm milk on my nightstand. Michael warned me about you in his letter. Michael. Her voice turned bitter with genuine emotion for the first time since I'd known her. I should have killed him months earlier. You mean you should have had Tommy and Jake stage his accident months earlier? Sarah pulled the medicine bottle from her pocket, her movements sharp and decisive. It doesn't matter now. You're going to take these pills, or I'm going to force them down your throat. No, Sarah, I'm not. Something in my voice made her pause. For 6 years, she'd heard me speak as a grieving mother, a grateful mother-in-law, a confused widow who needed help with everything. She'd never heard the voice I'd used for 30 years in high school classrooms when dealing with bullies and predators. You think you're so smart, she snarled. Helpless old woman playing detective, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I do. I straightened to my full height, letting the drugged act disappear completely. I know you've killed at least 12 people. I know about your network of accomplices across 4 states. I know you forged documents to add yourself to my insurance policy. Sarah took a step backward, her confidence wavering for the first time. That's impossible. You're just a retired teacher. You're right. I am retired. I opened my bedroom door and reached for something I'd positioned there hours earlier. But I wasn't always a teacher. I turned back to face her, holding my service weapon with the muscle memory of 23 years on the Minneapolis Police Department. Detective Helen Morrison, Minneapolis PD, retired. Sarah's face went white as understanding crashed over her. That's impossible. I researched you. You researched Helen Harrison, retired high school English teacher. You didn't research Helen Morrison, homicide detective. Her eyes darted toward the stairs, calculating escape routes with the desperation of a cornered animal. I changed my name back to my maiden name when I started teaching, kept my police background private. Parents get nervous when they think their kid's teacher used to investigate murders. The weapon felt natural in my hands despite 7 years of retirement. Some skills never fade. You can't prove anything. Sarah, for the past week, you've been confessing to multiple felonies while wearing a wire. I touched my ear, showing her the recording device that had captured every word. Everything you've said and done has been transmitted to Marcus Ellis and his team. Sarah lunged toward me with the medicine bottle, moving with the desperate speed of someone who'd killed before. I stepped aside with reflexes honed by decades of pursuing armed suspects through dark alleys and dangerous buildings. Sarah Richardson, you're under arrest for the murder of Michael Harrison and conspiracy to commit murder. She threw the pills at my face and ran for the stairs. I followed, weapon drawn, using the command voice that had stopped fleeing suspects in their tracks for over 2 decades. Ellis, subject is running. Kitchen exit. My radio training kicked in automatically, tactical communication as natural as breathing. Sarah burst through my back door into the waiting arms of Marcus Ellis and his team. As they wrestled her to the ground, she screamed with the rage of someone whose carefully planned murder had been turned into a trap. You have no idea what you've done. They'll kill you for this. They can try, I said, standing in my doorway watching the woman who'd murdered my son being loaded into an unmarked van. The night air was cool against my face, and for the first time since Michael died, I felt like myself again. Not the broken widow who'd needed help with everything. Not the grateful mother-in-law who'd trusted too easily. Detective Helen Morrison was back, and she had work to finish. 3 hours after Sarah's arrest, my kitchen had been transformed into a federal task force command center. FBI agents, state police investigators, and Marcus Ellis hunched over laptops while recordings of Sarah's confession played through speakers. Agent Rebecca Chen, the lead federal investigator, looked up from her notes with something approaching amazement. Detective Morrison, this is the breakthrough we've needed for 18 months. It's just Helen now. I've been retired for 7 years. Not anymore. We need your expertise to take down the entire network. Sarah sat in an interrogation room at the federal building downtown, but according to Agent Chen, she hadn't said a word since demanding a lawyer. She knows the network will eliminate her if she cooperates, Ellis explained. Dead witnesses can't testify. What about Tommy Breslin and Jake Morrison? Breslin disappeared 6 hours ago. Morrison was found dead in his apartment this morning, apparent heart attack. The speed of the network's response was both impressive and terrifying. They're cleaning house. Exactly, which means we have a narrow window to arrest the remaining operatives before they vanish or turn up dead. Agent Chen spread surveillance photos across my kitchen table, and I found myself automatically analyzing the images with skills I hadn't used in 7 years. Based on Michael's documentation and Ellis's investigation, we've identified 7 women currently active in the network, plus at least 12 support personnel providing false identities, financial services, and logistics. The faces stared up at me from the photographs, different ages, different backgrounds, but all with the same calculated smile I'd trusted for 6 years. How many victims total? Confirmed deaths, 41, suspected but unproven, probably another 23. 64 people murdered for money. The magnitude was staggering. What's the plan? Coordinated arrests across 6 states starting in 4 hours. But we need someone who understands their psychology, their methods. You want me to help interrogate them. We want you to lead the interrogation. You're the only person who's survived their operation and can speak to their techniques with authority. I looked around my kitchen, still bearing traces of the surveillance equipment that had saved my life. What about witness protection? Sarah said they'd kill me for exposing them. The network's about to be dismantled. By tomorrow morning, there won't be anyone left to threaten you. Agent Chen's confidence was reassuring, but I'd learned not to underestimate these people. I'll help, but I want to be there when you arrest the others. The first arrest took place in Phoenix at dawn. Linda Vasquez, operating under the name Linda Martinez, had been married to a 73-year-old retired banker for 8 months. According to surveillance, she'd been gradually poisoning him with digitalis extracted from foxglove plants she grew in their garden. When FBI agents knocked on their door, Linda answered in a pink bathrobe, playing the concerned wife perfectly. "Officers, is everything all right? My husband isn't feeling well this morning." "Ma'am, we're here to arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder and wire fraud." Her mask slipped instantly, and I saw the same transformation I'd witnessed in Sarah. "I have no idea what you're talking about. There must be some mistake." Agent Chen nodded to me, and I stepped forward. "Linda, my name is Helen Morrison. I was Sarah Richardson's last target." Recognition flickered in her eyes like a cornered animal realizing it's been trapped. "Sarah was arrested last night. She's confessed to everything, including your role in the network." "I don't know any Sarah Richardson." I pulled out my phone and played a recording from Sarah's confession. Sarah's voice filled the morning air. "Linda handles the West Coast operations. She's killed at least 6 men in the past 4 years." Linda's face went white. Behind us, paramedics were working on Linda's husband, who was unconscious and barely breathing. "Digitalis poisoning," one of the paramedics called out. "We need to get him to a hospital immediately." "You almost killed another innocent man," I told Linda as agents placed her in handcuffs. "He was dying anyway. I was just speeding up the process." The casual cruelty in her voice reminded me why I'd become a police officer in the first place. The second arrest in Denver went differently. Patricia Williams, aka Patricia Thompson, saw us coming and tried to run. She made it exactly 30 yards before Agent Martinez tackled her in her front yard. "Patricia Williams, you're under arrest for the murders of Robert Thompson, David Chen, and James Wilson." She fought the handcuffs, screaming, "You can't prove anything! Sarah's lying to save herself." "We don't need Sarah's testimony," I said, kneeling beside her. "Your victims' families have been asking questions for 2 years. We've exhumed 3 bodies. The autopsy results were very enlightening." Patricia stopped struggling. "Arsenic poisoning leaves traces in hair and bone tissue for decades," I continued, drawing on my years of homicide investigation. "Did you know that?" Her shoulders sagged in defeat. By afternoon, we had arrested 5 women and 11 accomplices across 6 states. The network that had seemed so untouchable that morning was collapsing with the systematic precision of a controlled demolition. The final arrest was the most satisfying. Margaret Stone, the network's financial coordinator, had been living in a mansion outside Chicago, managing the money stolen from 41 murder victims. When we arrived at her estate, she was loading suitcases into a Mercedes in her driveway. "Going somewhere, Margaret?" Agent Chen called out. Margaret turned, her expression shifting from panic to calculation. "I don't know what you think I've done, but I'm just a financial advisor." "You're the banker for a murder conspiracy," I said, stepping forward with the authority of someone who'd interrogated hundreds of suspects. "We have records of every transaction, every transfer, every payment you've made to killers." "That's impossible." Agent Chen handed her a warrant. "We're seizing your computers, your files, your bank accounts, and this property, which was purchased with proceeds from criminal activity." As Margaret was led away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've destroyed. This network has been operating for over a decade. We've been careful, professional, successful. You've been murdering people for money. We've been providing a service to women who deserved better than what they had." The twisted logic made my stomach turn. By killing their husbands? By freeing them from marriages that weren't working anyway? I shook my head. "You're a serial killer, Margaret. A very organized, very successful serial killer. But still, just a killer. That evening, back in my kitchen, Agent Chen debriefed me on the day's results. 7 arrests, 19 total in custody, and we recovered over $2.3 million in stolen assets. What about the victims' families? The recovered funds will be distributed to them. It won't bring back their loved ones, but it might provide some closure. I thought about Michael, about the justice he'd died trying to secure. What happens to Sarah now? Life in prison without parole, if she cooperates. Death penalty if she doesn't. And the others? Similar sentences. We have enough evidence to ensure none of them ever hurt anyone again. As the federal agents packed up their equipment and left my house, I sat alone with my thoughts for the first time in days. Sarah was in prison. Her network was destroyed. The threat to my life was over. But the cost had been devastating. Michael was still dead. 64 other people were still dead. Families had been destroyed. Fortunes stolen. Lives ended for nothing more than greed. I picked up the framed photograph of Michael from my mantel, taken on his wedding day 6 years ago. He'd been so happy, so optimistic about his future with Sarah. If only he'd known then what kind of monster he was marrying. But he'd figured it out in the end. And his courage, his systematic documentation, his determination to protect me even after death, had brought justice not just for himself, but for dozens of other victims. My son had died a hero, and his mother, the retired detective he'd trusted to finish what he started, had honored his sacrifice. 6 months later, I stood in front of a room full of police officers at the Minnesota Law Enforcement Training Academy. The most important lesson I learned from the Sarah Richardson case, I told them, is that predators count on us to see what we expect to see. Faces around the room nodded with recognition. These were seasoned investigators who understood how criminals exploit assumptions. For 6 years, I saw a devoted daughter-in-law who cared about my welfare. I saw someone grieving my son's death alongside me. I saw a pharmaceutical sales rep with a tragic foster care background who just wanted to belong to a family. I clicked to the next slide in my presentation. Sarah's booking photo filled the screen. What I was actually looking at was a serial killer who had murdered at least 12 people and was systematically poisoning me to death. The room was silent, listening intently. The signs were there, the isolated incidents that didn't quite make sense. The convenient helpfulness that seemed too perfect. The way she inserted herself into every aspect of my daily routine. I advanced to a slide showing Michael's evidence documentation. My son saw what I couldn't see because he wasn't blinded by gratitude and grief. He documented everything because he understood that good intentions aren't enough when you're dealing with sophisticated criminals. After the presentation, a young detective approached me. "Detective Morrison, I have an elderly mother who recently started dating someone new. After hearing your story, I'm wondering what warning signs I should watch for." "Trust your instincts," I told her. "If something feels off, investigate. Ask questions. Don't worry about seeming suspicious or ungrateful. The people who love you want you to be safe, not polite." Over the past 6 months, I'd given similar presentations to law enforcement agencies, senior centers, and community groups across the Midwest. The story of Michael's investigation and the network's takedown had become a case study in how organized criminals target vulnerable populations. But for me, it was also a story about transformation. I'd retired from police work 7 years ago, ready to spend my golden years as a high school teacher and grandmother. Michael's death had forced me to become someone I hadn't been in years. A detective again. A protector. A fighter. Standing in my kitchen that evening, I looked at the commendation letter the FBI had sent me. For exceptional service in the investigation and prosecution of a multi-state murder conspiracy. It would go in a frame next to Michael's photograph. My phone rang. Agent Chen's number appeared on the screen. "Helen, I have news about the Richardson case." "What kind of news?" "Sarah's agreed to cooperate. She's providing information about other networks operating in the Southeast and Pacific Northwest." How many more victims? Potentially hundreds. Your case opened up investigations we didn't even know we needed. After hanging up, I walked to my back door and looked out at the neighborhood where Sarah had stalked me for 6 years. The house across the street had new owners now. A young couple with a toddler who waved at me every morning when I got my newspaper. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of how close they'd come to witnessing a murder. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor Margaret holding a casserole dish. "I made too much tuna casserole again," she said when I opened the door. "Would you like some for dinner?" For just a moment, Sarah's voice echoed in my memory. "I brought you some warm milk to help you sleep." Then I looked at Margaret's genuine smile, remembered the 6 months of normal neighborly interactions we'd shared, and opened my door wider. "That's very thoughtful. Come in. I'll make coffee." Because that's what my son would have wanted. Michael had died fighting monsters so that ordinary people could continue offering casseroles to their neighbors without fear. His sacrifice had meaning, because life went on. Trust, carefully given, could still exist. And his mother would spend whatever years remained to her, making sure other families never faced what we'd endured. That was Michael's true legacy. Not the pain of his death, but the protection his courage had provided to countless future victims. "What's the hardest lesson you had to learn about people?" I asked my audience at every presentation. The answers varied, but the wisdom was always the same. People are capable of great evil and great good, sometimes in the same person. The key is learning to recognize the difference before it's too late. Your inner wisdom matters. Trust it. Use it. Share it with others who need to hear it. Because in the end, protecting each other is what makes us human.